Hello viewers, welcome to this video lecture series on C programming. Today's topic of discussion is on language translators. The main topic to be discussed here is the compiler. Apart from this, I wanted to give a little introduction to assembler and interpreter as well. So whether it is an assembler or compiler or interpreter, we call these are language translators. Now why do we require translators? Normally whatever program the user or the programmer is writing, it is always in high level language. So this high level language cannot be understood by the machine. This language has to get converted into what? Into a language which can be understood by the machine, and that is called as the machine language. So program which converts this high level language into a machine language is a translator. Now this translator can be an assembler, it can be a compiler, or it can be an interpreter. So here for assembler is used to convert a program written in assembly language into object code or machine language. So normally the target language is machine language only, but the source language here is the assembly language. In case of assembler will only convert a program which is written in assembly language. In assembly languages, normally we are using the mnemonics, like to add two numbers or to perform an addition we use add, then for multiply mul, for subtract sub. So these words are not understood by the machine. This has to get converted into what? Into a machine language or the binary language, which is in terms of zeros and ones, or you can call it as object code. So the job of the assembler is to convert this assembly language into binary language. So this is what I have written here. This is C. You can see the translator takes the assembly language and it produces what? The machine language. So now what about compiler and interpreter? Interpreter and compiler both converts the high level language into machine language. What is the difference? If compiler also converts high level language into machine level language, interpreter is also converting high level language into machine language, then what is the difference between these two? So the differences between these two I shall explain here. I have written the differences in two columns: high level language into machine language, high level language into machine language. Definitely both are going to perform the same thing. Suppose there is a program written in high level language. In C, I am just showing you here one example using the C language. So this becomes your source program. Now this source program is all getting converted into machine language. The difference here between interpreter and compiler is the compiler converts the source program into machine language before the program is executed. What do you mean by before the program is executed? Suppose if this is the initial C program, then next comes what? Translation phase, that is the compiler is converting this .c extension to .obj, that is the object code. Then comes what? The linker will make it this particular file as an executable file. So before completing the execution, the entire code here, whatever is written in the source program, gets converted into a machine language in one go. That means if a program is having whether it is 5 lines or 10 lines or 100 lines in the source program, the compiler scans the entire program and it produces the object code. This is what I have written here. It will take all the statements of the program at once and convert it into machine code. It scans the entire code in one go. But in case of interpreter, it converts the source program while the program is getting executed. It converts the source program into machine code line by line. So remember this statement, line by line. Suppose if this is the program, okay, high level language or the source program, then the interpreter takes the first line, it converts that particular line and execute it. So line by line the execution is happening here. Whereas in case of compiler, the complete set of lines are first converted into object code and then it gets executed. Whereas here line by line the conversion takes place as well execution takes place. The compiler will work on translation, linking and loading mode. So the linker and the loader functions I'll be explaining in my future session. Presently you can just remember this is going to work on these linking and loading mode apart from the translation mode. Whereas interpreter will work only on the interpretation mode. In case of compiler, data will be taken after the file is ready for execution. Now what do you mean by this? Data will be taken only after the file is ready for execution. For that I have written a diagram here. You can see This is the source program. Okay, then the translator used here is compiler. This compiler will convert the source program into object file, that is in language, machine language, which can be understood by the machine. The source program, suppose if it is C, I have written here extension is .c, whereas the machine code or the object code, it will get an extension as .obj. Then finally the linker will combine these object files and produce the executable file exe. So the final file will get an extension .exe. Now at this point of time the data is taken, that means to the file which has got executable code, to that file the data is given and finally the output is obtained. So this, in case of interpreter, if you see, if this is the interpreter, the source program and the data both are required here at the same time. The reason is it is going to translate line by line. So every time when it translates a line, whatever data is required, it will take that, and one sentence I have written here, data will be taken while conversion is taking place. Compiler does the conversion fast, interpreter is slower. Since the compiler is going to carry out the conversion in one go, it is quite fast. Interpreter does line by line, that's why the speed is slow here. In compiler, errors will be shown only after the entire compilation. Or once the complete program is compiled, and it is going to show you the list of errors. Then if the errors are there, then definitely the user or the programmer is going to debug those errors, and then it will perform its compilation. In case of interpreter, errors will be shown after every line is converted. This will definitely happen here because it is going to translate line by line. So after every line, if there are any errors, it will be displayed. Debugging is difficult in case if the translator is a compiler, because once it compiles the entire program and give you the list of errors, so the errors to get corrected, that is debugging of all those errors, a huge list of errors if it is there, then it becomes quite difficult. But in case of interpreter, debugging becomes simpler, as you are going to see the errors after every line, then immediately the user or the programmer is going to debug those errors. In case of compiler, once the exe file is ready, you can execute any number of times. Source program is further not required. Yes, whatever is the initial program, the source program, that program gets converted into object code, and then finally it will have what? An executable code. Once the executable file is ready, you are not supposed to use the source program again, because you have carried out the complete process here. Debugging has completed, compilation, that in object code, then finally the executable file. You can save this executable file and keeps on executing again and again. In case of interpreter, it needs source code every time to run the program. Since a program is not completely getting into an executable form, as and when it gets executed, it needs the source code. The source code has to be still stored in the memory. If the translator is compiler, it requires more memory. In between this source file and the executable file, what is that? The intermediate file is the object file. Even this object file needs space in the memory. In case of interpreter, it takes less memory. Examples for programming languages that uses the compilers are C, C++, Java, whereas the examples for the programming languages that uses interpreter as a translator, Python, Ruby, Perl, Java, PHP, MATLAB. Also remember, Java can be regarded as both a compiled and an interpreted language. Some examples of compiler, we have the Borland, which is a Windows based, GCC, which can be used on Linux platform, Turbo C is Windows based. There is one more compiler, Just in Time. It can work on both Windows and Linux platform. Then other examples for compilers are NetBeans, Microsoft Visual Studio, Microsoft Visual C++. Apart from these three translators I have mentioned, there is one more translator called as preprocessor. So this preprocessor normally converts high-level language into high-level language. For example, if you take a preprocessor converts the code written in C into an equivalent program in simplified C language. If you look into a source program of C, you have the statements #include. Okay, #include stdio.h. You are including so many standard header files in your C program. So any statement which is preceded by this pound symbol, For that, the conversion has to take place into a high level language, and that is carried out by the preprocessor. So for this compiler and interpreter, I can give an analogy here. There is a meeting between two leaders from two different countries. One is from India, so we call it as an Indian leader, and another, let us take Japan. These two leaders have to talk to each other and they do not know the language. That means the Indian leader doesn't know the language of the Japanese. The Japan person doesn't know the language of Indian. So for these two people, a person who can translate these languages is appointed, and this translator, this person will definitely try to translate whatever the Indian leader speaks, and it will convey to the Japanese leader. Then when it will listen to the Japanese leader, it will convert that Japanese language into Indian language and convey to the Indian leader. So here what exactly I wanted to say is, the person who is the translator here is carrying out the translation line by line. So it is simply like an interpreter here. For compiler, I can give you one example. Suppose if you are watching a movie, you know English, you know Hindi, but this particular movie is in some other language. Let us take for example, it is in Tamil. You are not able to understand this language, but using the subtitles that are displayed on the screen, so with this subtitles you are able to understand the complete movie. Here the entire movie, whatever dialogues are made for the entire movie are ready, and it will be available on the screen for the entire movie. Hence we say that the compilation is already done and it will help the viewers to watch this and understand. So this is an analogy for the compiler. So this is all about the compilers in this session. Hope this session is useful to you all. If you find it useful, please like, share and subscribe to my channel. Thank you. Bye bye and take care.